The engine of my 10-year-old Honda Civic hummed a low, vibrating protest as I turned onto the long, winding driveway of my parents' house. Outside, the world was a pristine, biting white. A blizzard had been threatening northern Pennsylvania all week, and now, on Christmas Eve, it had finally delivered. Snow clung to the pines like heavy wool blankets, beautiful and suffocating all at once. Inside the car, the heater was blasting, but I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "Mom, is it okay if I give Uncle Brad his present first?" Leo asked from the back seat. I glanced in the rearview mirror. My 14-year-old son was clutching a rectangular package wrapped in brown butcher paper, tied carefully with red twine. His knuckles were white. Leo was a sensitive boy, quiet, the kind of kid who felt the edges of the world too sharply. He had spent 3 weeks working on this gift in the garage, sawdust clinging to his hair, refusing to let me see until it was finished. "We'll see, honey," I said, forcing a brightness into my voice that I didn't feel. "Let's get inside and say hello to Grandma and Grandpa first." Sophie, my 10-year-old, was busy adjusting the bow on her own gift, a box of homemade cookies she'd baked for her cousin Chloe. "Do you think Chloe will like them? I used the expensive chocolate chips this time, the ones you hide in the top cupboard." I smiled, a genuine one this time. "She'll love them, Sophie. Who doesn't love chocolate?" But my stomach twisted. I knew who. My family. My name is Julia. I run a boutique financial consulting firm. I'm good with money. I'm good with planning. I'm the one who remembers birthdays, who organizes anniversaries, who quietly pays off the heating bill when my parents forget. But in the hierarchy of the Miller family, I am simply the sister. The background noise. The ATM. The main character has always been Brad. Brad, my older brother by 2 years. The golden child. The high school quarterback who never quite realized the game ended 20 years ago. He works in sales, a vague term that seems to involve a lot of golf and very little commission. Yet, he drives a leased Porsche, wears Italian loafers in the snow, and looks at me with a mixture of pity and disdain because I drive a Honda and buy my clothes at Target. We parked behind Brad's massive SUV, which was taking up 2 spots, of course. "Game face is on, team," I whispered to myself as we stepped out into the biting wind. We hauled the bags of food I'd cooked, the glazed ham, the scalloped potatoes, the 3 different types of pie up the icy steps. No one came to the door to help, even though I could hear the television blaring from the living room. I pushed the door open. A wave of heat and the smell of cinnamon hit me, along with the sound of a football game. "We're here," I called out. My mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She looked tired, but put on that tight performance smile she always wore when Brad was around. "Julia, you're late. The turkey is already resting." "The roads were bad, Mom," I said, kissing her cheek. She smelled of hairspray and nervous energy. "Where should I put the ham?" "Just find a spot. The counters are full." She looked over my shoulder. "Oh, hello, kids. Wipe your feet, please. Chloe just vacuumed." I doubted Chloe had lifted a finger, but I didn't say anything. We walked into the living room. There he was, Brad. He was sprawled on my father's leather recliner, a beer in one hand, the remote in the other. He didn't stand up. He didn't even look away from the screen. "Hey, Jules," he grunted. "You blocked me in?" "Merry Christmas to you too, Brad," I said, setting down the heavy bag of gifts. "And yes, I parked behind you." "Unless you're planning to leave in the middle of dinner?" He finally looked at me, his eyes glassy. He'd started drinking early. "Might have to. Chloe's got a party later." Speaking of the devil, Chloe, my 19-year-old niece, was curled up on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Perfectly highlighted hair, designer jeans, and an air of absolute boredom that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. "Hi, Chloe," Sophie chirped, holding out her tin of cookies. Merry Christmas! Chloe glanced up, her eyes flicking over Sophie's outfit, a cute sweater I'd bought her from a department store. Chloe smirked. Hey, Tiny, thanks. She took the tin and set it on the floor without opening it. I'm doing keto, so I probably won't eat those. Sophie's face fell. Oh, but it's the good chocolate. Whatever, Chloe mumbled, turning back to her screen. I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck. Breathe, Julia. It's Christmas. Do it for the kids. Where's Dad? I asked. Garage, Brad said, hiding from Mom. He laughed, a loud barking sound that grated on my nerves. The next 2 hours were an exercise in endurance. I spent the entire time in the kitchen, finishing the dinner, setting the table, and washing the prep dishes. My mother fluttered around, complaining about her arthritis, while Brad and my father sat in the living room discussing business opportunities that I knew were just Brad asking for money in code. I just need a bridge loan, Dad, I heard Brad say. Just until the commission check clears. The market is volatile right now. I chopped the carrots aggressively. I knew for a fact there was no commission check. I had seen my parents' bank statements. I managed their retirement accounts. They were bleeding cash to keep Brad's lifestyle afloat, and every month I would quietly transfer $1,000 into their account to fill the hole, calling it a gift. Finally, dinner was served. We sat around the mahogany table. The spread was magnificent, mostly thanks to the food I had brought and cooked. Brad piled his plate high with the ham I had paid for. So, Brad said, chewing with his mouth open, I heard a rumor. He looked at me across the centerpiece. What rumor? I asked, cutting Leo's meat for him. That you're finally loosening the purse strings for Chloe. The trust fund. The table went silent. This was the elephant in the room. Years ago, when my business first took off, I set up an educational trust for all the grandchildren. Since Brad had zero savings and a mountain of credit card debt, I had put the most into Chloe's account. It was currently sitting at just over $200,000, enough for 4 years at Duke, where she had just been accepted. The fund is ready, I said quietly. It's set to disperse directly to the university next month. Chloe perked up, her eyes lighting up with greed rather than gratitude. I need a car too, Aunt Julia. Duke's campus is huge. Walking is for peasants. My father chuckled. She's got a point, Julia. Can't have a miller walking around in the cold. The fund is for tuition and books, Chloe, I said firm. Not cars, not parties. Brad rolled his eyes. Always so tight, Jules. You're sitting on a gold mine with that company of yours, and you act like a miser. It's unattractive. That's probably why you're still single. The insult landed right in the center of my chest. My divorce 3 years ago hadn't been my choice. My husband had left because he couldn't handle the stress of a successful wife. Brad knew that. I'm single because I have standards, Brad, I said, my voice steady but cold. All right, Mom interjected nervously. Let's not fight. It's Christmas. Who wants pie? We moved to the living room for gifts. This was usually the hardest part. I handed Brad a small box. Inside was a sleek, high-end smartwatch, a Garmin Phoenix I knew he'd been eyeing. It cost me $800. He opened it, looked at it, and shrugged. Cool. But I was kind of hoping for the Apple Watch Ultra. The battery on this one sucks. He tossed it onto the side table like it was a pair of socks. Thank you, Aunt Julia, Chloe said flatly as she opened the envelope containing a gift card to Sephora. Only $200. Inflation is a thing, you know. My teeth were grinding so hard I thought they might crack. But then it was Leo's turn. He stood up, his hands trembling slightly, holding his brown paper package. He walked over to Brad. Uncle Brad, Leo said, his voice small, I made this for you. I know you like hunting, so I made this. Brad took the package. He tore the paper off carelessly. Inside was a wooden carving. It was a duck, a mallard, carved from a block of cherry wood. Leo had sanded it until it was smooth as glass, painted the feathers with intricate detail, and even varnished it. It was a masterpiece for a 14-year-old. It was beautiful. Brad held it up by the neck. He looked at it, then he looked at Leo, and he started to laugh. The laughter wasn't a warm, joyful sound. It was a bark, a sharp, jagged noise that cut through the cozy warmth of the living room. "A duck?" Brad scoffed, dangling Leo's hard work by its beak like it was roadkill. "You spent all that time in the garage making a toy duck?" Leo's face flushed a deep, painful crimson. It's a decoy for your desk or the mantel. "I carved it from that cherry wood stump in the backyard." Brad turned the duck over, inspecting the bottom where Leo had carefully burned his initials and the date. "To Uncle Brad, love, Leo." "Kid," Brad sighed, shaking his head, "you gotta get a life. While other boys are out playing football or chasing girls, you're playing with wood?" He looked at my father. "Dad, did you see this? The boy's basically making dolls." My father chuckled, taking a sip of his scotch. "He's a sensitive one, Brad. Leave him be." But he didn't stop laughing. He didn't defend his grandson. "No, seriously," Brad continued, his voice getting louder, emboldened by the alcohol. "It's embarrassing. What am I supposed to do with this? Put it next to my trophies?" Then he did something that stopped my heart. He leaned forward and tossed the wooden duck toward the fireplace. It didn't go directly into the flames, but it hit the metal grate with a sickening clack and rolled onto the hearth, inches from the fire. The varnish hissed as the heat hit it. "Oops," Brad grinned. "Missed." Leo made a sound, a choked, wounded noise like a puppy being kicked. He took a step forward to retrieve it, but Brad put a hand out to stop him. "Leave it," Brad sneered. "It's trash, kid. Just like the rest of the junk you bring here. Just like those dry cookies." He gestured vaguely at Sophie. "Your mom drives a piece of junk car. You wear junk clothes, and you give junk presents. You're all just mediocre." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the wind howling outside. "Mediocre," Brad repeated, tasting the word. "That's the word. You're mediocre failures. Exactly like your mother. Always trying so hard to be part of the club, but never quite making it." I looked at my mother. She was sipping her wine, looking studiously at the Christmas tree. I looked at my father. He was staring into his glass. I looked at Chloe. She was smirking, filming the whole thing on her phone for Snapchat. And then I looked at Leo. Tears were streaming down his face, silent and hot. Sophie was clutching his arm, terrified. Something inside me broke. But it wasn't a loud break. It wasn't a shattering glass. It was a steel cable snapping under tension, a clean, sharp, violent separation. The snap is a real thing. I had read about it in psychology books. It's the moment when the brain stops processing emotional pain and switches entirely to survival logic. The grief vanished. The desire to please them vanished. The need for their approval, which had driven me for 38 years, evaporated like mist. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, icy calm wash over me. It started at my fingertips and moved up to my brain, clarifying everything. I stood up slowly. "Leo," I said. My voice was low, steady, and unrecognizable even to my own ears. "Go get the duck." Leo looked at me, surprised by the authority in my tone. He scrambled to the hearth, grabbed the warm wood, and cradled it against his chest. "Sophie," I said, "get your coat." "Julia, don't be dramatic," my mother sighed, finally looking up. He's just joking. Brad has a dark sense of humor, you know that. Sit down, we haven't had dessert. Yeah, Jules, Brad grinned, leaning back in the recliner, the king of his little kingdom. Don't be such a snowflake. I'm teaching the boy to be a man. Toughen up. I walked over to where my purse was sitting on the hallway table. I put on my coat, I wrapped my scarf around my neck. Every movement was precise, deliberate. I walked back into the living room. I stood directly in front of Brad. He looked up at me, smugness plastered across his face. You called my children trash, I stated. It wasn't a question. I called the gift trash, Brad corrected, waving his hand. And yeah, maybe the situation. You guys are just a lot. Enjoy the ham, Brad, I said softly. I paid for it. Enjoy the heat. I paid for the oil this month. Enjoy the roof over your head. What are you talking about? He scoffed. Dad paid for this. I looked at my parents. They went pale. They knew. They knew I had been funneling money into their accounts for years to keep this house from foreclosure. They knew Brad had drained them dry. Merry Christmas, I said. This is the last time you will ever see us. Oh, stop it, my father barked, slamming his glass down. You're ruining the holiday. Sit down, Julia. That is an order. I looked at my father, a man I had worshipped, a man I had spent my life trying to impress, and I realized he was just a small, bitter old man protecting his golden son. No, I said. I turned to my kids. Let's go. We walked out. Run away then, Brad shouted after us. Go back to your sad little life. Nobody wants you here anyway. Bye, losers, Chloe called out. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind us, cutting off their voices. The silence of the winter night was deafening. The snow was falling harder now, thick white flakes that stuck to our eyelashes. Mom, Leo whispered as we crunched through the snow to the car. I'm sorry I made him mad. I stopped. I grabbed both of my children and pulled them into a hug, so tight I could feel their hearts beating through their winter coats. No, I told them, staring fiercely into Leo's tear-filled eyes. You listen to me. You did nothing wrong. That duck is a masterpiece. You are brilliant. You are kind. And you are worth 10 of him. But he said we're trash, Sophie sniffled. He lied, I said, and I promise you he is going to regret saying that for the rest of his life. We got into the Honda. I started the engine. As I reversed down the driveway, I looked up at the house one last time. The windows were glowing with warm yellow light. It looked like a postcard. It looked like a home. But I knew the truth. It was a nest of vipers, and I had just stopped feeding them. As we drove away into the dark, swirling white of the storm, I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt dangerous. I drove with one hand on the wheel. With the other, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The time for being the good sister was over. The time for the provider was over. It was time to collect the receipts. The drive home usually took 45 minutes. That night, in the blizzard, it took 2 hours. The silence in the car wasn't empty. It was heavy with unprocessed trauma. Leo sat in the back, clutching his wooden duck, staring out at the passing headlights. Sophie fell asleep against the window, exhausted by the emotional whiplash. My mind, however, was racing at 100 miles an hour. For years, I had enabled them. That was the hard truth I had to swallow as the windshield wipers slapped back and forth. Swish, thud. Swish, thud. I had bought into the lie that family supports family, no matter what. I thought if I gave enough, if I fixed enough problems, if I paid enough bills, they would eventually love me as much as they loved Brad. But love isn't a transaction, and disrespect isn't a currency I was willing to accept anymore. When we finally pulled into our driveway, the townhouse looked dark and cold. But it was ours. I paid the mortgage, I bought the groceries. There was no ghost of an ungrateful brother haunting these hallways. "All right, guys," I said, turning off the engine. "Inside, pajamas, hot cocoa, we're doing our own Christmas." I got the kids settled. I made them the richest, most marshmallow-filled hot chocolate possible. We put on Home Alone, Leo's favorite. I watched them until their breathing slowed and their shoulders relaxed. They were safe. "Mom?" Leo asked from the couch, his eyes half open. "Are we really never going back?" "Really," I said, stroking his hair. "I promise." Once they were asleep, I went into my home office. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the small desk lamp. It cast a sharp pool of illumination on my laptop. I sat down. I cracked my knuckles. I felt like a surgeon preparing to cut out a tumor. I opened my browser and navigated to the client portal of the investment bank where I held the family trusts. Login: J_Miller_consulting. Password. The dashboard loaded. Numbers filled the screen. Columns of assets, growth charts, distribution schedules. I scrolled down to the account labeled Chloe Miller Educational Trust. Balance: $214,560.42. It was a beautiful number. Compound interest and aggressive market strategies over 10 years had turned my initial contributions into a full ride at a private university. It was freedom. It was a debt-free start to life. I stared at the number. I remembered Chloe smirking as she filmed her father throwing Leo's gift. I remembered her calling my daughter tiny and my son mediocre. I remembered the morality clause. As a financial planner, I draft strict contracts. When I set up this trust, mostly to shut my parents up about helping the family, I included a standard clause. Section 4.2. The trustee, me, reserves the sole right to revoke funds if the beneficiary, Chloe, or the beneficiary's guardians, Brad, engage in conduct deemed detrimental to the family unit, criminal in nature, or grossly offensive. Calling my children trash and failures on Christmas Eve, that qualified as grossly offensive. I clicked on the Management tab. I selected Dissolve Trust. A warning box popped up. "Are you sure? This action is irreversible. Funds will be returned to the grantor, Julia Miller." I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a flicker of guilt. I thought about Leo's sanding that wood for 3 weeks. I clicked Confirm. Processing. Success. Funds transferred to primary account. The balance under Chloe's name turned to 000. I wasn't done. I opened the credit card portal. I had given Brad a platinum card as an emergency card 3 years ago when he claimed his car broke down. He had been using it for gas, dinners, and who knows what else. I usually just paid the bill without looking, too tired to fight. Current balance, $4,500. Pending charges, $350. The steakhouse, tonight. He had gone out to a fancy dinner after we left. He was eating steak on my dime while his daughter called my kids losers. I clicked Report Lost/Stolen. I clicked Cancel Card. I took a deep breath. The air in the room felt cleaner, lighter. I picked up my phone. I had missed calls from my mother. A text from Brad. "You're being a bitch. Come back and apologize to Dad." I didn't reply. I went to my banking app. I had a standing order set up for my parents. $1,200 on the first of every month. It covered their property taxes and utilities. Cancel recurring transfer. Done. I leaned back in my chair. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. It was the rush of taking power back. For decades, I had been the doormat. Tonight, I became the door, and I had just slammed shut. I looked at the clock. It was 11:30 p.m., The banks were closed for the holiday. The transfers would process electronically, but the notifications wouldn't hit their emails until the morning. Boxing Day, the day traditionally meant for giving boxes of gifts to the poor. Tomorrow, I was going to give my brother a box of reality. I went to the window and looked out at the storm. The snow was burying everything. It was burying the old Julia, too. I went to bed, and for the first time in years, I slept without grinding my teeth. I woke up to the smell of pancakes. For a second, I forgot. I lay in the warm cocoon of my duvet, the winter light streaming in through the blinds in sharp, gray lines. Then, the memory of the wooden duck hitting the fireplace grate crashed into me. I sat up. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. 14 missed calls, 28 text messages. It had begun. I walked out to the kitchen. Leo was at the stove flipping pancakes. He looked tired, his eyes puffy, but he offered me a tentative smile. Sophie was setting the table. "Morning, Mom," Leo said. "I made blueberry." "My favorite," I said, hugging him from behind. "You guys okay?" "We're okay," Sophie said, though her voice was small. "Is Uncle Brad, is he going to come here?" "No," I said, pouring myself a cup of strong coffee. "He is not welcome here. Not ever again." We sat down to eat. I made a rule. No phones at the table. We talked about Minecraft. We talked about the snow. We talked about everything except the nuclear bomb I had dropped on the family finances the night before. But as soon as breakfast was over, I picked up my phone. The first message was from Brad, sent at 9:05 a.m. "Hey, card got declined at the gas station. Weird. Call the bank." 9:15 a.m. "Julia, pick up. Seriously, it's embarrassing." 9:45 a.m. "WTF, Julia? I just got an alert from the Duke portal. Tuition payment failed. Check bounced." 10 a.m. "Call me now." 10:15 a.m. "You psycho bitch, what did you do?" I took a sip of coffee. It tasted delicious. The phone rang in my hand. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether to answer. I decided I needed to hear it. I needed to know they understood. I swiped green and put it on speaker. "Julia!" My mother's voice was shrill, bordering on hysteria. "Thank God, there's been a terrible mistake. The bank, the hackers. They wiped out Chloe's college money. Brad is losing his mind." "It wasn't hackers, Mom," I said calmly. There was a pause, a heavy, confused silence. "What?" "I canceled the trust," I said, "and I canceled Brad's credit card, and I stopped the transfer for your bills." You what?" She sounded like I was speaking a foreign language. "But why? It's Christmas. Chloe starts school in 3 weeks. The tuition is due." "I know," I said. "Perhaps Brad can pay for it." "Brad doesn't have that kind of money. You know that." She was screaming now. "You promised. You set that trust up years ago. You can't just take it back." "Actually, I can. Read the contract, Mom. Section 4.2. I can revoke funds for gross misconduct." "Misconduct? What misconduct?" "He called my children trash," I said, my voice hardening. "He threw my son's gift in the fire. He called me a failure. You all laughed, remember?" "Oh, for God's sake, Julia." My father's voice roared from the background. He must have snatched the phone. "This is about a stupid wooden duck? Are you insane? You're destroying your niece's future over a joke?" "It wasn't a joke to me, Dad, and it wasn't a joke to Leo." "You are being vindictive," he shouted. "You are a selfish, jealous little girl. You've always been jealous of Brad. Fix this. Fix this right now, or what?" I challenged. "You'll cut me out of the will? We both know there's nothing in the will, Dad. There's only debt. Debt that I have been paying." Silence on the other end. "I'm done," I said. "I'm done being the bank. I'm done being the punching bag. Brad is the golden child, right? Let him fix it. Let the successful brother pay for his daughter's Ivy League education. Julia, please, my mother's voice came back, weeping now. She's your family. She's innocent in this. She called my daughter tiny and my son mediocre. She laughed when the gift burned. She is exactly like her father. Maybe community college will teach her some humility. I have no daughter, my father spat. Good, I said. Then you won't miss my money. I hung up. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was from rage. The audacity, the absolute entitlement. They didn't care that they had hurt us. They only cared that the money tap had been turned off. I looked up. Leo was standing in the doorway, listening. Did you really take the money away? He asked. Yes. Because of me? Because of them, I corrected. Because they are bullies, and we don't pay bullies to hurt us. Leo nodded slowly. A small, tentative smile touched his lips. It was the first time he had seen me stand up to my father. I could see the shift in his eyes. He wasn't just seeing a mom. He was seeing a protector. My phone pinged with a notification. It wasn't a text. It was a Facebook tag. I opened the app. There it was. A long, rambling post from Brad. Can't believe I have to say this. My own sister, Julia Miller, decided to ruin Christmas. She stole my daughter's college fund, money that belonged to her by rights, because she got her feelings hurt over a misunderstanding. She embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from our family. My parents are devastated. If anyone knows a good lawyer, hit me up. The gloves are off. Below it, comments were already rolling in from our small town's gossip circle. Oh my God, that's horrible. Always knew she was stuck up. Sue her. I stared at the screen. He was playing the victim. He was accusing me of embezzlement. That was a serious allegation. It could hurt my business. I felt a cold pit form in my stomach. I had expected anger. I hadn't expected him to try and destroy my career. Okay, Brad, I whispered. You want to play public court? Let's play. I walked to my office and pulled open the file cabinet, the bottom drawer, the one marked Family Receipts. Inside were 10 years of bank statements, copies of checks, the paperwork for the time I bailed Brad out of gambling debt in Vegas, $15,000. The paperwork for the time I paid off his car so it wouldn't be repossessed, $8,000. The receipts for my parents' roof, their boiler, their medical bills. I picked up the stack. It was heavy. It weighed as much as a brick. I wasn't going to reply on Facebook, not yet. I was going to build a fortress of evidence so high that when it fell on him, he would never crawl out. By noon, the post had 40 shares. Small towns are like echo chambers. Lies bounce off the walls and amplify until they sound like gospel. Brad knew exactly what he was doing. He was painting a narrative. The evil rich sister versus the struggling honest family. Mom, why is Mrs. Gable calling you a thief? Sophie asked, looking up from her iPad. She was on Facebook. I had forgotten to block her access. I snatched the iPad gently. Don't look at that, honey. People say stupid things when they're angry. Are we thieves? No, we are the bank, I said grimly. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. This is Julia. Julia, it's Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. I just saw Brad's post. Honey, did you really take Chloe's money? That money was, well, the family thought that was an inheritance from Grandma. I almost laughed. Grandma left us 3 quilts and a collection of ceramic cats, Sarah. That money was my earnings, my savings. I put it there. Well, Sarah sniffed, Brad says he contributed to it too. He says you just managed it. Brad hasn't contributed a dime to anything since 2005, I snapped. He's lying, Sarah. He's broke and he's panicked. You don't have to be so harsh. He's your brother. You can't just let Chloe miss college. It looks bad. It looks like you're jealous of her success. Jealous? The word tasted like bile. My son is an artist. My daughter is a genius at math. Chloe is a mean girl who bullied them on Christmas. I'm not jealous. I'm done. Well, the family is very upset. You should fix this before it gets ugly. It's already ugly, Sarah. Goodbye. I hung up and blocked her number. Then I blocked my cousins. Then I blocked the neighbors who were sad reacting to Brad's post. I went back to my desk. I needed to focus. Brad's accusation of embezzlement was the dangerous part. If he filed a police report or complained to the Regulatory Board for Financial Advisors, I would have to open my books. I needed to be preemptive. I spent the next 3 hours scanning documents. Exhibit A, wire transfer, $15,000, Brad Vegas debt. Exhibit B, email from Brad, 2018. Jules, please, I beg you. I need $5,000 for rent or they kick me out. I promise to pay you back. Exhibit C, the trust agreement, signed by me as grantor, Brad listed only as guardian. I was organizing the files into a PDF when my email pinged. Subject, urgent, Duke University tuition. From chloe.miller99@gmail.com. Aunt Julia, I don't know what Dad said to you, but this isn't fair. I worked hard to get into Duke. You promised me this money. If you don't transfer it back by tomorrow, I'm going to tell everyone about how you touched me when I was little. I froze. The air left my lungs. I read it again. Tell everyone about how you touched me. It was a lie, a sick, twisted, horrific lie. I had never. God, the thought made me nauseous. She was threatening to accuse me of abuse to blackmail me into paying her tuition. My hands started to shake violently. This was a new level. This wasn't just family drama. This was criminal extortion. This was evil. I screenshotted the email immediately. Then I printed it. Then I saved it to 3 different hard drives. I didn't reply. You don't negotiate with terrorists. I needed legal counsel. My lawyer, Harrison, was on vacation in Aspen, but I sent him a text marked 911. Harrison, my brother is accusing me of theft. His daughter is blackmailing me with false abuse allegations. I need a cease and desist, and I need a defamation suit ready to go. 10 minutes later, Harrison called. Julia, his voice was crisp and reassuring. I saw the text. Don't panic. Send me everything. The email from the niece? That's a felony. Extortion across state lines via digital communication. I want to bury them, Harrison, I said, my voice trembling. I don't want to just win. I want to make sure they can never hurt my kids again. We will, he said. Do not respond to them. Radio silence. Let them dig their hole deeper. The more they scream, the more evidence we have. I hung up, feeling slightly steadier. I walked into the living room. The Christmas tree lights were twinkling. It looked peaceful, but I felt like I was in a trench in the middle of a war zone. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Julia, it's Linda, Brad's ex-wife. I saw the Facebook post. My heart skipped a beat. Linda. We hadn't spoken since the divorce 5 years ago. Brad had painted her as a crazy woman who tried to steal his money. I had believed him because I was the good sister. I had even helped pay for Brad's divorce lawyer. Hi, Linda, I typed back cautiously. He's lying, isn't he? She wrote. Yes. 3 dots appeared. Then a message that changed everything. I have files, Julia, from the divorce discovery. Bank accounts he hid, debts he didn't tell the judge about, and something else. Can we meet? I stared at the phone. An ally, an unexpected ally from the ghost of Brad's past. I'll put the coffee on, I replied. Come over. Linda looked different than I remembered. She looked tired, but harder. The nervous woman who used to apologize for Brad's outbursts at family dinners was gone. In her place was a woman wearing a leather jacket and a look of grim determination. She stomped the snow off her boots in my entryway. "Nice place," she said, looking around. "Peaceful, unlike the asylum over on Oak Street." "Coffee is in the kitchen," I said. "Thank you for coming." We sat at the kitchen island. Linda blew on her steaming mug, her eyes scanning my face. "He really did it, huh?" she asked. "Called the kids trash? And threw Leo's carving in the fire." Linda shook her head. "He's a monster, Julia. I tried to tell you guys, back when we were married, but your mom, she treats him like he's the Messiah." "I know," I admitted, shame coloring my cheeks. "I'm sorry, Linda. I should have listened to you back then. I paid for his lawyer against you. I regret that." Linda waved her hand. "Water under the bridge. He charmed you. He charmed me too once. But we're not here to talk about the past. We're here to talk about the money." She reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "When we divorced," Linda said, sliding the envelope across the granite counter, "my lawyer hired a forensic accountant. We were trying to find assets. We thought he was hiding money. And he wasn't hiding assets. He was hiding debt. Massive debt. But we found something else. We found a pattern." I opened the envelope. Spreadsheets, heavily highlighted. "Look at the dates," Linda pointed. "January 2018, August 2019, December 2021. I looked. These were dates when I had given Brad large sums of money, the emergency loans. Now look at the next column," she said. "Gambling sites, DraftKings, BetMGM, and a few transfers to a consulting firm that turned out to be a bookie in Jersey." I felt sick. "He gambled it? All of it? Every cent you gave him to save the house or fix the car, he punted it away within 48 hours. But the house is still standing. The car wasn't repossessed. Because he took out payday loans to cover the immediate fires, then used your next gift to pay the interest on those loans. It's a Ponzi scheme, Julia, and you're the investor." I stared at the papers. I had been funding a gambling addiction for a decade. I thought I was saving my family. I was just feeding the beast. "But here's the kicker," Linda said, flipping to the back page. "This is a credit report from last week. I still have access because my name is still on one of the old joint accounts he refuses to close." She pointed to a line item. "Application for secured loan pending. Collateral, trust fund hashtag 8842, beneficiary C. Miller." My blood ran cold. "He was trying to borrow against Chloe's trust fund?" I whispered. "He's in deep, Julia. The bookies are calling. He promised them he'd have access to the funds as soon as Chloe turned 18 and signed over control for investment purposes. That was his plan. Convince Chloe to let Daddy manage the money, then drain it to pay his debts." I sat back, the room spinning slightly. "He wasn't mad because Chloe couldn't go to Duke," I realized. "He was mad because I cut off his getaway car." "Bingo," Linda said. "He needs that $200,000 to keep his kneecaps intact. That's why he's attacking you so hard. He's desperate." I looked at Linda. "Why are you helping me? After what I did to you?" Linda smiled, a sharp, dangerous thing. "Because he hasn't paid child support for our son, Marcus, in 6 months. Marcus needs braces, and honestly, watching Brad Miller crash and burn is my favorite spectator sport." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "We're going to burn him down, Linda, together." "One more thing," Linda said, her voice dropping. "Chloe, she sent you an email, didn't she?" I stiffened. "How did you know?" "Because she tried it with me last year, when I refused to buy her a car. She threatened to tell people I hit her. She's sociopathic. She's Brad in a skirt, Linda corrected. But she's sloppy. I have the texts she sent her friends bragging about how she manipulates adults. Crocodile tears work every time, lol. I'll send them to you. We spent the next 2 hours strategizing. Linda became my witness, my corroboration, my partner in crime. By the time she left, the snow had stopped. The sun was trying to peek through the clouds. I felt stronger. I wasn't just a victim defending herself anymore. I was a prosecutor building a case. My phone rang. It was Harrison, my lawyer. Julia, he said, I've drafted the cease and desist, but we have a problem. Brad has filed a motion. A motion for what? He's filed for an emergency injunction to freeze your assets. He's claiming undue influence over your parents and misappropriation of family funds. It's a nuisance suit, completely baseless, but it means we have to go to court on Friday. Court? I felt a surge of adrenaline. Yes, a hearing, to determine if there's merit to proceed. Good, I said, looking at the pile of evidence Linda had left on my counter. Good? Harrison sounded surprised. Most clients hate court. I don't hate it, Harrison, I said, picking up the credit report showing Brad's attempt to steal the trust fund. I want to look him in the eye when I destroy him. Okay then, Harrison said. I'll see you Friday. Bring everything. The days leading up to the hearing were a blur of anxiety and preparation. Brad continued his online assault. He posted photos of sad Chloe crying on her bed, staged clearly, given the perfect lighting. He posted cryptic quotes about karma and greedy relatives. But I stayed silent. Radio silence, Harrison had said. On Thursday afternoon, the day before the hearing, chaos arrived at my doorstep. I was working from home, trying to reassure a client that my personal drama wouldn't affect their portfolio, when a banging on the front door made me jump. I checked the doorbell camera. It was Brad, and he wasn't alone. He was with a man in a cheap, ill-fitting suit carrying a briefcase. Julia, open up, Brad shouted, pounding the wood. We know you're in there. I see your car. I grabbed my phone and started recording. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the intercom. Get off my property, Brad, or I call the police. This is Mr. Henderson, Brad yelled at the camera. My attorney. We're here to serve you papers personally. Open the damn door. Leave the papers on the mat, I said calmly. Miss Miller, the lawyer spoke up. He looked nervous. We are attempting to resolve this amicably. If you agree to reinstate the trust fund today, my client is willing to drop the lawsuit regarding the embezzlement. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Embezzlement? You mean the money I earned and freely gave to ungrateful leeches? There is no settlement, Mr. Henderson. Tell your client to save his gas money. He's going to need it. Brad shoved his face into the camera lens. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked unhinged. You think you're so smart, Julia? You think you're better than us? He spat. You're nothing. You're a lonely, bitter spinster. Dad hates you. Mom is sick with worry because of you. You are killing this family. The family died on Christmas Eve, Brad, I said. You killed it when you called my children trash. I'll ruin you, he screamed, kicking the door. I'll tell everyone about your business. I'll tell the IRS you're cooking the books. That's a threat, I said, and it's recorded. Mr. Henderson, I assume you're advising your client that extortion is a crime? The lawyer grabbed Brad's arm. Brad, stop. Let's go. We'll see her in court. Brad pulled away, glaring at the camera one last time. You're dead to me, Julia. Promise? I whispered as they walked away. I waited until their SUV disappeared down the street. Then I saved the video. Another brick in the wall. I went to check on the kids. They were in the basement playing video games with headphones on. Thank God. They hadn't heard the screaming. But the war wasn't just at my front door. It was at their school. Friday morning, the day of the hearing. I dropped Leo and Sophie off at school. I hugged them a little tighter than usual. "Mom, you're squeezing me," Leo laughed, adjusting his backpack. "Sorry, just have a good day. If anyone bothers you, anyone at all, you go straight to the principal, okay?" "Okay, Mom, we'll be fine." I watched them walk into the building, a knot of worry in my stomach. Chloe had been quiet for 2 days. That scared me more than her threats. I drove to the courthouse to meet Harrison. At 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was the school nurse. "Ms. Miller, this is Nurse Joy. You need to come to the school immediately." My heart stopped. "What happened? Is it Leo? Sophie?" "It's Leo. There was an incident with an older girl? A cousin?" "I'm on my way." I looked at Harrison. "I have to go. My son." "The hearing is in 20 minutes, Julia." "Stall them," I snapped, grabbing my keys. "I don't care. My son comes first." I drove like a maniac. I made it to the middle school in 10 minutes. I ran into the principal's office. Leo was sitting on a chair, holding an ice pack to his cheek. His shirt was torn. "Leo!" I rushed to him, checking him over. "Oh my God, what happened?" Leo looked up. He wasn't crying. He looked furious. "Chloe," he said. The principal, Mrs. Vance, cleared her throat. "Apparently, your niece, Chloe Miller, came onto the campus during recess. She's not a student here, but she signed in as a family visitor, claiming to drop off a forgotten lunch." "She cornered me by the bleachers," Leo said, his voice shaking with rage. "She had her phone out. She started filming me. She said I was the reason she couldn't go to college. She said I was a retard who played with dolls." I felt the blood pounding in my ears. "And then?" "Then she tried to grab my sketchbook," Leo said. "She wanted to rip it up. I wouldn't let go. She scratched me, and then she shoved me into the fence." I looked at the red welt on his cheek, the scratch marks on his neck. "Did you fight back?" I asked. "No," Leo said. "I just held on to my book, and then Mr. Henderson, the gym teacher, saw her and pulled her off." "She was screaming that I was a thief." Mrs. Vance nodded. "We have detained Chloe in the front office. We called the police. She is an adult, Miss Miller. This is assault on a minor. We have the whole thing on security footage." "She's 18, I said, my voice cold as ice. "Press charges. I want her arrested." "Mom," Leo asked, "is she going to jail?" "Yes," I said, "she is." I looked at Mrs. Vance. "I need that footage, now. I have a court hearing in," I checked my watch, "20 minutes, and that footage is going to end this war." Mrs. Vance hesitated. "Technically, it's evidence." "My lawyer will subpoena it anyway," I said. "Just send it to my email, please. They are trying to destroy us." She looked at Leo's bruised face. She nodded. "Check your inbox in 5 minutes." I kissed Leo's forehead. "I have to go finish this, Leo. Grandma is coming to pick you up. My friend Linda, not that grandma. You're safe." "Go get him, Mom," Leo said. He touched his cheek. "She hits like a girl anyway." I ran back to the car. I had the evidence of the debts. I had the evidence of the blackmail email. I had the recording of Brad's threats. And now I had video of Chloe physically assaulting my son. I walked into the courtroom at 10:58 a.m. Brad was sitting at the plaintiff's table, looking smug in a suit that was too tight. My parents were behind him, looking self-righteous. Harrison looked relieved to see me. "Where have you been?" "Getting the nail for the coffin," I whispered. I sat down. I opened my laptop. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Patterson, entered. "All rise." We stood. "We are here for an emergency hearing regarding the Miller Family Trust," the judge said. "Mr. Henderson, you filed the motion. Speak." Brad's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, the defendant, Julia Miller, has maliciously misappropriated funds that were verbally, contractually obligated to my client's daughter. We are asking for an immediate freeze of her accounts and reinstatement of the trust. The judge looked at me. Miss Miller or Mr. Harrison? I stood up. Your Honor, if I may. Harrison nodded. The plaintiff claims I stole money, I said, my voice ringing clear in the quiet room. But the truth is, I protected my money from a gambling addict and a violent abuser. Objection! Brad's lawyer shouted. I have evidence, Your Honor, I said, including a video from 30 minutes ago where the plaintiff's daughter, the supposed victim, assaulted my 14-year-old son at his middle school. Brad's face went white. My parents gasped. Approach the bench, Judge Patterson said, her eyes narrowing. I walked forward, holding my thumb drive. It was time to show them what trash could do. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. I stood before the bench, my laptop open, the screen facing Judge Patterson. Beside me, Brad shifted his weight from foot to foot, his cheap suit straining at the seams. He looked like a man who was used to charming his way out of trouble, but the air in this room was too thin for charm. Play it, Judge Patterson said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I pressed the spacebar. The audio wasn't great. It was recorded on a security camera, but the voices were unmistakable. The sound of Chloe's shrill screaming filled the courtroom. You're a retard. You're the reason I'm not going to Duke. You and your loser mom stole my money. Then, the sickening sound of a body hitting a chain-link fence. The distinct, muffled thud of flesh on metal. Leo's voice, calm but terrified, saying, I'm not fighting you, Chloe. And finally, the gym teacher's whistle blowing. I paused the video. Judge Patterson stared at the frozen image of my 19-year-old niece shoving my 14-year-old son. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. When she looked up, her eyes were hard flint. Mr. Henderson, the judge addressed Brad's lawyer, is that your client's daughter? Your Honor, Henderson stammered, sweating visibly. My client, he wasn't aware. This is an unfortunate incident, but it's separate from the financial matter of the trust. Separate? Judge Patterson cut him off. You are asking this court to force Miss Miller to reinstate a discretionary trust fund for a beneficiary who is currently sitting in a jail cell for assaulting the trustee's minor child? You want me to reward violent behavior with $200,000? It's a verbal contract, Your Honor, Brad spoke up, unable to help himself. Julia promised. She promised Mom and Dad. That money is family money. Quiet, Henderson hissed at him. No, let him speak, I said, stepping back from the bench, because I have one more document for the court, since we are discussing family money. I pulled out the forensic accounting file Linda had given me. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady, the plaintiff claims I embezzled family funds. In reality, the plaintiff, Bradley Miller, has gambled away approximately $150,000 of monies I gifted to our parents for their medical care and housing expenses over the last 5 years. I handed the bailiff the stack of papers. Exhibit C, DraftKings transaction history matched against my transfer dates. Exhibit D, a loan application where Bradley Miller attempted to use the very trust fund in question as collateral for a high-interest predatory loan. The courtroom gasped. I heard my mother behind me let out a small, strangled sob. Brad's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. That's a lie. She's faking those documents. She's the thief. Mr. Miller, sit down. The judge slammed her gavel. The crack echoed like a gunshot. She flipped through the file I had provided. Her eyebrows shot up. She looked from the papers to Brad and then to me. "Miss Miller," the judge said, her tone softening significantly. "This trust fund, the clause regarding gross misconduct?" "Section 4.2, Your Honor," I replied. "I see it. Conduct deemed detrimental to the family unit." I would say assaulting the trustee's son and attempting to defraud a bank by pledging assets he doesn't own qualifies. Judge Patterson closed the file. She looked at Brad with pure disgust. "Mr. Miller, your motion for emergency injunction is denied with prejudice. You are not getting access to that money. Furthermore, based on the evidence of extortion presented in Exhibit B, the email from your daughter threatening false abuse allegations, I am issuing an immediate temporary restraining order against both you and Chloe Miller. You are to have no contact with Julia Miller or her children." "You can't do that!" Brad screamed, standing up and knocking his chair over. "That's my money. She owes me. I'm the eldest." "Bailiff," the judge said calmly, "remove him." Two officers stepped forward. Brad looked at them, then at me. His eyes were wild, desperate, the eyes of a trapped animal. "You think you won?" he spat as they grabbed his arms. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing without us. You'll be alone forever." "I'd rather be alone than be your victim," I said. As they dragged him out, I turned to look at the gallery. My parents were sitting there, frozen. My father looked old, defeated. He was staring at the door where his golden child had just been escorted out like a common criminal. My mother was weeping into a tissue. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Julia," she mouthed. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a heavy, exhausting relief. I turned back to the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor." "Ms. Miller," Judge Patterson said as she gathered her robes, "good luck. And tell your son, tell him the court hopes he keeps making his art." I walked out of the courtroom. The air in the hallway was cooler. Harrison, my lawyer, high-fived me. "That was a slaughter," he said. "The restraining order is huge, and with the assault charge, Chloe isn't going to Duke. She's going to probation hearings for the next year." "It's not over, Harrison," I said, looking down the hall where my parents were slowly emerging from the courtroom doors. "There's one loose end left." "The house?" Harrison asked. "The house," I confirmed. My parents walked up to me. They looked small. For the first time in my life, I didn't see the giants who raised me. I saw two elderly people who had bet their entire retirement on the wrong horse. "Julia," my father said, his voice trembling, those papers about the gambling, is it true?" "It's all true, Dad," I said. "Every time you asked me for money for the boiler or the roof or Mom's surgery, I gave it to you. And you gave it to Brad, and he bet it on football." We thought he was investing it," my mother sobbed. "He said he had a system." "He lied to you," I said, "just like he lied about the trust fund." "Well," my father straightened his coat, trying to regain some dignity, "it's a mess, a terrible mess. But we're family. We need to go home and figure this out. You need to drop this restraining order, Julia. We can't have Brad legally barred from family gatherings." I stared at him. Even now, even after seeing the receipts, even after seeing the video of his grandson being thrown into a fence, he was still protecting Brad. "There won't be any family gatherings, Dad," I said, "and you don't have a home to go back to." My father frowned. "What are you talking about? That house has been in the family for 40 years. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out the final document, the one I had been saving for the very end. "Do you remember 5 years ago," I asked, "when the bank was threatening foreclosure because Brad convinced you to take out a second mortgage to fund his startup?" My father paled. "Yes, but the bank stopped calling. We thought Brad fixed it. Brad didn't fix it, I said. I did. I held up the deed. I bought the note from the bank, Dad. I paid off the arrears, and I bought the mortgage. You haven't been paying the bank for 5 years. You've been living there because I let you. I took a step closer. I own the house. The silence in the hallway was heavier than the silence in the courtroom. My father stared at the document in my hand. He reached out to touch it, his fingers shaking, as if testing to see if it was real. You own it? He whispered. But the title, the deed. The deed is in a holding company, I explained, my voice clinical. JM Holdings. You never asked who JM was. You just assumed Brad handled it. My father looked like he had been punched in the gut. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I corrected him. You wanted to believe the lie. You wanted to believe Brad was the hero who saved the farm. But it was me. It was always me. The daughter you called selfish. The daughter you let Brad humiliate every Christmas. Julia, please. My mother grabbed my arm. Her grip was weak. We're your parents. You wouldn't put us on the street. I'm not putting you on the street, I said. I'm selling the house. Selling it? My father's face went red again. You can't sell my house. It's not your house, Dad. It's my asset. And right now, it's a distressed asset housing tenants who abuse the landlord. I looked them both in the eye. Here is the deal. I am listing the house on Monday. I will give you 30 days to vacate. Whatever equity is left after the mortgage is paid off, which won't be much considering how much debt Brad piled onto it, I will give to you in cash. You can take that money and rent a small condo, or you can give it to Brad and watch him gamble it away. That's your choice. 30 days? My mother wailed. But where will we go? It's winter. You have 30 days, I repeated. That is generous. A bank would give you 7. You are ungrateful, my father spat, the venom returning. After everything we did for you, we raised you, we fed you. And I paid you back, I said, with interest. I paid for your cars, your medical bills, your vacations. I paid 100 times over. The ledger is balanced, Dad. We are even. I turned to Harrison. Send them the formal notice to quit by courier this afternoon. Julia! My mother screamed as I walked away. Don't walk away from us. We're your family. I didn't look back. I walked out of the courthouse and into the cold winter air. The sun was shining on the snow. It was blindingly bright. I got into my car and sat there for a moment. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I thought I would cry. I waited for the tears. But they didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was air. Just air. I could breathe. For the first time in 38 years, the crushing weight of their expectations, their judgment, their unpayable debt was gone. I started the car. I had to go pick up my son. When I got to Linda's house, Leo was sitting on the couch with an ice pack on his face, playing Mario Kart with Linda's son, Marcus. Mom! Leo jumped up when he saw me. Did you win? I looked at his bruised cheek. I crouched down and hugged him. We won, baby, I whispered. We won everything. Is Chloe going to jail? She's been arrested, I said. She'll have to answer for what she did. And Uncle Brad can't hurt us anymore. Linda walked into the room holding 2 mugs of coffee. She looked at my face and smiled. You dropped the bomb, didn't you? She asked. The house, I said. I gave them 30 days. Linda let out a low whistle. Damn, Julia, you don't play. I learned from the best, I said, thinking of how Brad used to manipulate me. I just decided to stop playing their game and start playing mine. That night, my phone was silent. I had blocked them all. But Linda told me what was happening on Facebook. Brad was spiraling. He was posting frantic status updates, begging for money, claiming he was the victim of a legal conspiracy. But the tide had turned. People in our small town talk. The video of Chloe assaulting Leo had leaked, not by me, but likely by one of the kids at school who filmed it. The comments section on Brad's posts had shifted from support to disgust. Dude, your daughter beat up a kid? I heard you stole your sister's money for gambling. Get a job, Brad. His world was crumbling, just like the title of this video says. And the beautiful part? I didn't have to lift a finger. I just pulled my support away, and the gravity of his own choices crushed him. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics. I hired a moving company for my parents because I'm not a monster, and I knew they couldn't lift the furniture themselves. I didn't supervise the move. I sent Harrison to handle the keys. On the final day, the day of the deadline, I drove by the house. I parked down the street, hidden by a large oak tree. I watched as Brad's SUV, which he somehow still had, probably by hiding it from the repo man, was loaded up with boxes. He looked terrible. He had gained weight, his face was unshaven, and he was screaming at his father. My father was hunched over, carrying a lamp. He looked frail. He yelled something back at Brad, waving his hand dismissively. They were fighting. The united front of the Miller family had shattered. Without my money to smooth over the cracks, the toxicity they had directed at me was now turning inward. They were eating each other alive. I saw my mother sitting on the front steps, crying. She looked at the house she had lived in for 40 years, the house she lost because she trusted a liar over her loyal daughter. A part of me wanted to get out of the car, to run to her, to write a check and fix it all. No, the voice in my head was Leo's voice. They called us trash. I put the car in drive. I didn't look back. I drove home to my kids. We had a puzzle to finish. The house sold in 3 days. The market was hot, and despite the bad energy inside, the structure was sound, thanks to the repairs I had paid for. After paying off the remaining principal and the closing costs, there was a check for about $65,000. I mailed it to my parents' new address, a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It was enough for them to live comfortably for a few years if they were careful. They weren't careful. Linda told me the news a month later. Brad moved in with them, she said, sipping wine on my patio. It was spring now. The snow had melted, revealing green grass. He told them he needed a place to stay while he got back on his feet. He convinced your dad to sign the check over to a joint account so he could manage the investments. I closed my eyes. Let me guess. The money is gone? Not all of it, Linda said, but he bought a new truck, a Ford Raptor, $80,000. He put $20 down and is financing the rest with their rent money. I shook my head. I can't save them, Linda. I tried for 10 years. I know, she said. You saved the important people. You saved yourself. Chloe pleaded guilty to simple assault to avoid jail time. She got 2 years of probation, community service, and a permanent criminal record. Duke rescinded her acceptance letter the moment the charges were filed. Last I heard, she was working at a tanning salon in the mall and making TikToks about how the system is rigged. She never apologized to Leo. But Leo flourished. Without the constant criticism of his uncle and grandfather, Leo's confidence soared. He entered his wooden duck, the one Brad had tried to burn, into a county art fair. It won first prize. We put the blue ribbon on the fridge. The burn mark on the duck's tail feather was still there, a scar that added character. Leo called it his battle duck. As for me, my business exploded. It turns out, when you aren't spending 20 hours a week managing your family's crises and draining your mental energy on toxic people, you have a lot of bandwidth for success. I landed 3 major corporate contracts. I renovated my kitchen. I bought a new car, not to show off, but because I wanted heated seats. But the silence was the hardest part. Don't let anyone tell you that cutting off family is easy. It's not. It's like amputating a limb. Even if the limb is gangrenous and killing you, you still miss it. There were Sunday mornings when I instinctively reached for the phone to call my mom, only to remember she had called me a thief. There were moments when I wanted to ask my dad for advice on a leaky faucet, only to remember he told me I was dead to him. The grief comes in waves, but unlike the pain of their abuse, this grief was clean. It was healing grief. It was the pain of a wound closing up, not a wound being ripped open again and again. Summer turned into fall. I heard rumors that my parents were being evicted from their apartment because Brad hadn't paid the rent. I heard rumors that my father had a mild heart attack. I sent a card for the heart attack, just a card. Get well soon, Julia. I didn't send money. I didn't visit. A week later, the card was returned to me, unopened. Someone had written, "Return to sender" in angry red ink across the front. I put the card in the trash, and with it, I threw away the last shred of guilt. Then came November. Then December, the anniversary of the snap. Christmas Eve arrived again. The weather was identical to the year before, a white-out blizzard burying Pennsylvania. But inside my house, everything was different. There was no tension, no walking on eggshells, no performative cooking to impress people who didn't care. The house smelled of pine and real gingerbread. Music was playing, jazz, not the football game. The doorbell rang. It wasn't Brad with a lawyer. It was Linda and Marcus. And Harrison, my lawyer, who had become a close friend, and Mrs. Gable from down the street, who had apologized for believing the Facebook posts and brought a lasagna. "Merry Christmas!" Linda shouted, shaking snow off her coat. She handed me a bottle of expensive wine. "To the victor go the spoils." "To peace," I corrected her, clinking glasses. We sat around the dinner table. It was a mismatched group, a found family. "Mom, look," Sophie squealed. Leo was handing out gifts. He wasn't nervous this year. He stood tall. He handed me a box. I opened it. Inside was a small, delicate wooden carving of a bear, a mother bear. "Because you protected us," Leo said, his voice deep and cracking a little, like a mama bear. I felt tears prick my eyes, but these were happy tears. "It's beautiful, Leo. It's the best gift I've ever received." We ate, we laughed, we told stories. Nobody insulted anyone. Nobody asked for a loan. Nobody checked their phone to see if they looked rich enough for Instagram. As I looked around the table, I realized something profound. Brad had called us trash. He had called us mediocre. But looking at my son's art, looking at my daughter's report card, straight A's, looking at the warm, loving home I had built with my own 2 hands, I realized Brad didn't know the definition of wealth. Wealth isn't a Porsche you can't afford. It isn't a house you didn't pay for. And it certainly isn't a Harvard degree paid for by an aunt you despise. Wealth is peace. Wealth is sleeping at night. Wealth is having children who know they are loved unconditionally, not transactionally. Later that night, after everyone had left and the kids were asleep, I sat by the fire. I looked at my phone. I unblocked my mother's number. Just for a second. I was curious. There was a voicemail from 2 days ago. I played it. "Julia, it's Mom. We're staying at a motel. Brad took the truck and left. He said he was going to Florida. He left us here. We don't have anywhere to go for Christmas. Please, we're so cold. Please call me." The message ended. I stared at the fire. The flames danced, orange and yellow. I thought about the mother bear carving sitting on the mantel. If I called them, I would bring the chaos back. I would bring the toxicity back into my children's lives. I would show them that boundaries are flexible if the abuser cries loud enough. I couldn't do that to Leo. I couldn't do that to Sophie. And I couldn't do that to Julia. I deleted the voicemail. I re-blocked the number. I stood up and turned off the lights. "Merry Christmas," I whispered to the empty room. I walked upstairs to my warm, safe bed, and I slept like a baby. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell.